hoje vamos ver adjetivos. So today we're going to look at adjectives. And in Portuguese, adjectives function in a variety of ways, but mostly the key things to keep in mind are that you always have to think about gender and the singular or plural nature of the noun in question, the noun that's being described, to ensure that there's agreement between all the components in a sentence. So adjectives, like most words in Portuguese, are going to have a variety of ways to end. There are some common endings, and we're going to look at some of those today. The easiest ones to think about are adjectives that just end in O or A. And for the most part, adjectives that end in O are typically masculine, and adjectives or words, I would say nouns and adjectives that end in A, are feminine. So Portuguese functions very much along this masculine and feminine idea of how words are composed. And I want to be clear about when we talk about masculinity and femininity in terms of words and their gender. We're not talking about any sort of the cultural or social implications of gender. We're not attributing certain items as manly or as girly. That's not at all what we're talking about when we refer to gender in adjectives or in language at all. We're referring to the way that the word over time has been conceived and developed and thought of as either being masculine or feminine. So it's not the thing that the word represents, because there are many instances where we have a concept or a noun that has multiple words for it for that specific item or concept, and in reality one of those nouns, one of those words that we use, that combination of letters, may be deemed to be masculine and another one may be deemed to be feminine. So it's not the thing itself that's masculine or feminine, it's the word. Okay, so looking at some of the common endings when we're thinking about adjectives in Portuguese, here's one. When we think about adjectives that end in E, Z, that have this ISTA or ISTA ending, or the ETA, ETA ending. These can be both masculine and feminine, so it'll largely depend on what thing we're describing, whether or not the adjective is going to be feminine. Here's a couple of examples in how we look at adjectives that end in E or the ishta ending. With those, we're just adding s's to make them plural. So again, they can be both masculine and feminine. So looking at this first example, amiga, amigo, interessante. So we have an E ending here, interessante. It's the word interesting, interessante. It's somewhat of a cognate. We can look at that word and see the word interest in there, right? We can definitely identify that. So what we're describing here is an interesting friend. Now, is that friend masculine or feminine? Well, if it's a feminine friend, amiga, amiga, interessante. If it's a masculine friend, amigo, interessante. So the noun itself is what's going to determine whether that adjective is masculine or feminine. And then to make it plural, if it's amigas, if it's female friends, amigas, interessantes. Amigos, masculine friends, interessantes. So the adjective here is going to apply to both masculine and feminine. It's the word, the noun itself is what's going to determine the gender of what's being described here. Another example would be the word companheiro, or if you see there the backslash, all I'm trying to tell you is that that O can end in an A to make it feminine, companheira. So companheiro would be a male companion, also somewhat of a cognate. We can look at that word and see companion or some sort of companionship. So companheiro, companion, companheira, companion, female friend, female companion. So in this case, we're going to refer to them, we're going to call them a pessimistic companion, right? A pessimistic, pessimista, companheiro pessimista. Again, that ISTA ending, ista, can both be masculine or feminine, so it's going to be largely up to the noun to determine whether that adjective is functioning as a masculine noun or a feminine noun. So to make this plural, companheiros or companheiras, you just simply add an S. Again, words that end in O or A, to make them plural, you just add S's. And the same thing will apply to, in this case, this one also ends in an A, ishta ending. That'll just have an S applied to it because it ends in a vowel. You just add S's. But the key thing to remember, it's twofold, gender and the quantity. So if the adjective ends in an ISTA, that adjective can both be used for masculine and feminine nouns to describe both. Okay, here's a few more rules. So if an adjective ends in a Z, you're adding AR and then ES. Okay, so if it ends in a Z and AR, so one of the two, you add an ES to make them plural, which is largely like English, right? If it ends in a consonant, we add an ES to the end of it and we have plurality established. So it's not that different. So let's look at a couple of examples here. We have the word for boy, menino, menino feliz, so a happy boy, menino feliz. To make that plural, well, the meninos, just add an S, meninos, and then feliz, because it ends in a Z, or consonant in this case, add ES. So meninos felizes, meninos felizes. Aluno, it's the word for male student. Aluno and aluna are students. Aluno popular, so a popular student, popular male student. Aluno popular, if we're talking about a group of students. Again, when we're talking about plurality in Portuguese, if we're talking about gender, we attribute the masculine plural to mixed groups. So when we have a plural form like alunos, doutores, médicos, anything that's a group, a collective noun that's plural, the masculine is typically, if not always, there's one instance with grandparents where there's kind of a mix of which gender gets the deferred treatment, but we can talk about that in another episode. In this case, we're looking at alunos is the word for students now, because it could either be all male students or a mixed group of students. We want to say these students are popular, so alunos populares. So popular is the singular form of the adjective popular. Populares is the plural form of that same adjective. And again, ends in an Z or an AR, you add an ES to make it plural. A little bit more here. Adjectives that end in AL, EL, or UL can be used with masculine and feminine as well. So if it ends in an L, to make it plural, so there's twofold, right? We're thinking about adjectives both as masculine and feminine. These AL, EL, and UL endings are applied to both masculine and feminine. To make all of these plural, you remove the L and add an IS. Okay, so here's a couple of examples. Amigo, amiga, back to our friends. Amigo, amiga, leal. So leal is both masculine and feminine. It's the noun that's going to determine which gender we're talking about. Now to make that plural, amigos, and the same thing back to our alunos example. Amigos can both be a group of friends that are all male or a group of mixed gender friends. So it could be a group of male and female. Got that male deference when we have a plural, so just keep that in mind. And then amigas is a group of friends, but they're all female, so there's no distinction there. When it's a pluralized group, you just, if it's feminine, it stays in the feminine form. And for the most part, if you're describing a mixed group, you want to use the masculine form and then apply the adjective. In this case, leal, in the singular, the word for loyal, becomes leais. Leais. Leal, singular, leais, plural. Companheiro, companheira, some words we've seen just a couple of slides ago. Companion, companheiro responsável, so a responsible companion. Or companheira, companheiro responsável, companheira responsável. Again, the responsável ends in an L. That's going to be applied to both masculine or feminine. To make these plural, you remove that L in the adjective responsável and it becomes responsáveis. Responsáveis. So, companheiros responsáveis, companheiras responsáveis. Vamos continuar. And our next rule, and it's our last rule for adjectives for this video. If an adjective ends in or is, you add an A. Okay, for the feminine form. The E becomes an E without the circumflex. So if you have an is in the masculine form, and we'll look at the example down here with português, so the word for Portuguese. If you notice the masculine form of that adjective, português, in the feminine form, you remove the circumflex. So you kind of loses the need to have the circumflex to pronounce this word correctly. With an A at the end, the distribution over the syllables allows you to not need that circumflex. So back to the idea of plural. So again, to make these or and is endings feminine, you simply add an A. To make them plural, you add an ES in the masculine, because again, we're dealing with consonants, right? An or is going to have the R consonant, and then the S. So those you just add ES. For the feminine to make them plural, you have an A, you're just adding an S. So it really just comes down to that. So let's look at a couple of examples here. We have aluno trabalhador. So trabalhador. I even broke that word up there because it's a difficult one. It's a multisyllabic word that does not have any accents, so it just kind of spreads out the cadence across the 4 syllables. Aluno trabalhador. And trabalhador means hardworking. Trabalho is work. Trabalhador is a worker. So when you're calling somebody trabalhador, you're saying that they're hardworking. Aluno trabalhador is a male, hardworking male student. Aluna trabalhadora is a hardworking female student. Okay, so that's that. The or ending, ora. Trabalhador, trabalhadora. Alunos trabalhadores, so the pluralized form, we have our trabalhador ending. You just add es to make it plural in the masculine. And then in the feminine version of that, alunas trabalhadoras, now you're just adding the s because it ends in that, the a, our vowel, right? And typically that's our rule. Ends in a vowel, add s to make it plural. Amigo português, now we'll look at the is ending, português. And another thing I want to just point out before moving on from adjectives, when we're talking about nationalities, in English, we're kind of accustomed to capitalizing all nationalities. In Portuguese, you don't do that. You capitalize, obviously, the names of countries, but when we're using adjectives describing, different types of cuisine or cultural elements that pertain to a specific cultural region, a country, and there's an adjective or a descriptive word that allows us to, use the denomination of that country, you're going to make sure that that's lowercase. It's just a little rule for you to know. So, amigo português, a Portuguese friend, a male Portuguese friend, amigo português. The female Portuguese friend, amiga portuguesa. Amigo português, amiga portuguesa. Now, to make this plural, amigos portugueses and amigas portuguesas. So, even in the pluralized form of the word amigos, I guess I should have pointed this out as well, you don't need the circumflex, okay? So that's going to be it for today. É tudo do Low-Key Portuguese com adjetivos. We'll look at this at some point in the future to look at some other complexities, but these are the general rules when working with adjectives and ensuring that we have agreement both in terms of gender and quantity as we go through our sentences. Até a próxima. If you have any questions, please leave me some comments and I will absolutely address them. If you have ideas on videos that you'd like to see or have questions, those are very helpful in helping me create new videos, and it establishes a community amongst us that maybe somebody else will also pick up on that, and it's really helpful for me if you guys can give me some feedback on what you're looking for, because I don't want to replicate videos that are already out there by other content creators, other educators. So if there's something that you're not getting and you'd like to have that, I don't have that many subscribers yet, so you can get in on the ground floor and really be a part of this community and help this channel grow. So I hope to hear from you. Até a próxima. Ciao.